Welcome, you wonderful Year 11 students, to this video that will help us move away from English literature and onto our studies for English language. Up until this point, we've been focusing very heavily on Macbeth. We've looked at how Lady Macbeth is presented, we've considered how we're going to write our essay, and we've also looked at good examples of writing in preparation for that. What we do now is move on to English language until we're in a position to complete the English literature assessments. As we prepare you for an English language exam, this unit of work is going to emulate the way that the exam works. What normally happens is you get 5 pieces of writing, all based on a similar theme. The theme that we are going to use in these lessons is the theme of magic and supernatural. They could be any theme at all. We've had papers in the past about badgers and foxes. We've had one about seagulls. We've had one about rubbish dumps. We've had one about spies. It could be anything. In this case, we are using the theme of magic and supernatural as a practice ready for this exam. What I would like from all of you for today then is for all of you to understand how to answer low tariff GCSE language questions. What I'm looking for is every single one of you being able to engage with a fairly simple text, but the key thing here is that you are able to do this independently. I think if there's one thing that we notice when we're in class, it is probably that we help you too much. When it comes to these English language questions, I'm going to remove that help and allow you to complete these much more independently than when we did our analysis of Macbeth. Most of us will be able to answer low tariff questions with accuracy, and some of you will be able to track this text methodically and independently. In order to achieve a fantastic GCSE result in English language, you will need to show a mastery of a wide set of skills. Some of the questions that I've placed on screen for you are the types of questions that you need to be able to answer really confidently. They start from these simple questions and they end with the much more difficult questions. This first lesson is going to feel quite simple. It's going to feel very straightforward. However, as we progress through these question types, they will get progressively harder. For example, access, search and retrieve questions and words in context questions you will probably find quite easy. And then as we move on to the summarize, the synthesize or the compare questions, then they get a little bit more tricky. There are certain formulas that I can teach you to make sure that your essay is developing in the right way. But for today's lesson, we focus on the much simpler skills of access, searching and retrieving. Over the next few weeks, we're going to use certain texts to practice these skills. These are not the texts that are going to turn up in your exam, but these are texts that we are using to practice the skills. When it comes to English language, I can't stress this enough, the skills that you use are far more important than the text that we read. You can complete questions on any text at all. Hopefully, by the time we get to the exam, it doesn't matter what text turns up because you will have all of the skills needed to access that text and give me your answers. So we're going to start on the simple question types and then move on to those more advanced questions later. The first text that we are going to use is going to be one that is incredibly famous. It was written in 1997. It was written by a woman who invented a middle name for herself so that her name sounded more interesting. She wrote it in a Scottish cafe while unemployed, and she was a single mother. She sold more than 500 million copies of her books. She has earned £795 million from her writing. She wrote the best-selling book series in history. We are going to use one short extract from the very famous book Harry Potter. I think you might have heard of it, and we're going to use this for the purpose of practicing question types. The first question type, access, search and retrieve. In both Unit 2 and Unit 3, the examiner is going to ask you to read a text and demonstrate your understanding. That's a fairly simple, common way for an exam paper to begin. I always think the first couple of questions in an exam paper are not necessarily for wonderful, intelligent, bright students like yourselves. Those are the types of questions that some students who struggle with English, they can prove what they're able to do with simple questions. For you, I think of these as your bread and butter questions. These are the types of questions that you get quick marks at the start of your exam paper so that you can then focus on the much more lengthier questions that happen at the end of the exam. However, incredibly bright students often get very simple questions wrong, simply because they haven't practiced the skill required. These questions will test your ability to read at speed and to answer with accuracy. My suggestion is that you read the question first. Then, once you've read the question, highlight what the question is asking for, then read the text to locate the information. The way I think about this is, you wouldn't go and play hide and seek with someone you've never met before, because you don't know what they look like, and you don't know when you found them. So by reading the question first and by finding the information that you need to find, when you read the text, you will be able to recognize when you've come across the answer. When you've checked that you're correct, then you record the answer in the space provided. You only have 1.5 minutes for each mark available. Okay, based on the exam paper, it's about 90 seconds per mark. Access, search and retrieve questions are very often only worth 1 mark of the 80 available. Okay, so very short questions. When it comes to an access, search and retrieve question, very often you do not have to write in full sentences. You simply need to record the answer in the box that is provided. This is the extract that I'm going to ask you to read independently. I'm not going to read it to you because in the exam I won't be doing this. If you do have a reader in the exam, then I will be able to give you a reading of this text. And these are the questions that I'd like you to have a go at. You will notice that they are not the most challenging questions that you have ever seen. For example, question 1, how long has Harry lived at Private Drive? This doesn't require any knowledge from you at all. All it requires is for you to read through the text, find the information that is being requested, and to record it nice and neatly. None of these questions have huge amounts of taxing thoughts to go through. You simply find the information and you record it. However, when I've done these questions with incredibly bright students previously, they often get questions wrong. For example, at the bottom of the page it says, how did Harry's parents die? Lots of students simply record their knowledge of Harry Potter, the entire novel or the films. However, this question quite clearly shows that you need to look at the text that is given. So please don't come to a conclusion that you already know. I'd like you to find the information and find what's actually said. So be aware, the answer is in the text. You do not need any wider knowledge for these types of questions. Once you've had a go at those simple questions, at the end, I'd like you to have a go at these 3 questions. These simply ask for a little bit more of your inference. Okay, so some of these questions will have greater skill requirements, some will ask you to infer. The first question of these more tricky questions is locate 3 ways Harry is mistreated by his guardians. Now this text does not state Harry was mistreated by his guardians by this, this and this. In this question, the text does give you the answer, you simply have to infer what that answer is. So you will need to look for evidence to show mistreatment and then list those 3 ways. Number 2, locate 3 details that show his aunt and uncle prefer Dudley to Harry. Again, that is not stated in the text explicitly, but it is inferred. You will have to find 3 pieces of evidence that prove that these people prefer Dudley to Harry, and then you will have to, in your own words, tell me what those 3 details are. And then locate 3 ways that show Dudley is spoilt. Again, J.K. Rowling does not say Dudley is spoilt in the text, but she does show us that they're spoilt. So what I'm trying to show you is that some very simple questions at the start of the exam paper will need to be completed before you get onto the much more difficult questions. Accuracy is very, very important. Speed is important too. But when it comes to some of these questions, there is a greater level of difficulty. Again, you just need to identify when a question asks you to find something that has been inferred rather than is stated explicitly. What I would like you to do is to answer these questions for me, submit them to me, and then we can move on to more difficult questions next time. Thank you very much. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. I will speak to you all next time.